Hello, and welcome to Dare to Speak Difficult Conversations that Change Everything. Did you know that in a recent survey of 1,000 men, 42% self-identified as people pleasers, with 29% saying that they honestly didn't know how they feel about certain things? When we think of people pleasers, we think of women very often. We don't think men have the problem of people pleasing. We think that women have been conditioned, and they definitely have, to meet other people's needs and to please the other person. But what we might not realize is that men are in this situation too. And that is problematic. If you are a people pleaser, you know a few things about it. I'm certainly would self-identify as having been a people pleaser. I feel I was trained to be that way. I was trained to be compliant. I was trained not to speak up. I was trained to be pleasant and to work very hard at relationships to ensure that I wasn't causing any problems in the relationship. That was my job. I was told regularly as a young child that being helpful was one of my primary qualities, actually, and the reason that allowed my parents to do the things they did. And that's such a powerful message to receive. And women, we know because if we know anything about female history, if we know anything about feminism, if we know about any of the access, the world as it is now, actually, the manosphere, we know that female compliance is definitely seen as a positive, although not necessarily by women themselves. But we also know that in being people pleasing, what happens is you give and you give and give until in the end you explode. In the end, there comes a stopping point at which you don't feel you can give any more when you've had enough. And then what happens is you explode, and in that explosion, you will often get accused of being entirely unreasonable. Now, what's so interesting about people pleasing is that although we may have been trained to be a people pleaser, the people around us don't necessarily identify us that way. They identify us as just being really nice, really friendly, really helpful, really encouraging, really supportive, the kind of person who'll volunteer for stuff when you need a volunteer. Yay, the kind of person who will help until the point at which it all comes too much and you've offered and you've volunteered and you've helped so much that you can't take it anymore. So you explode and then you shut down and everybody thinks you've changed. Because what's been happening is the people around you have been trained into thinking that your needs don't matter. You have been trained into thinking your needs don't matter. But the idea that men are doing this too might be news to some of you. It actually often is news to the men themselves because they don't know that they're doing it. They just think that's the way you're meant to be. Or it's the way that they've become because they've learned that the people in their lives just don't like it when they're not being friendly and helpful and compliant. And then trouble happens. Separation and divorce rear its head. Family breakdown, family turmoil. And all of a sudden, we're in a situation. I found this myself when I was going through separation and divorce. We're in a situation where the desire to people please, often the lack of awareness about how I certainly felt about certain things. I just didn't know. I hadn't asked myself for so long that I didn't know. And that's what I find with men that I work with as well as women. They don't really know what they want. I can remember during my separation and divorce going to see a mediator very early on. And I paid her £200 for this first session. And she said to me, after I told her everything that was happening, she said, Eve, you don't know what you want. You are not ready for mediation. At the time, I felt that was a really expensive £200, but actually, she was completely right. And I think her words carried on to resonate with me for a long time afterwards. I didn't know what I wanted, I didn't know what I needed. I actually didn't know what was available to me. Um, I just didn't know. And my people-pleasing tendencies taught me not to ask those questions. So I wasn't asking them, what do I want? Is it okay for me to say no? I had, I've been a volunteer. I volunteered for lots of things in my life. And what I found is that if in a room where volunteers were asked for, if nobody stepped forward to volunteer, I'd actually have to sit on my hand to stop myself from volunteering, even for things that I knew I wasn't suited to, or things I absolutely certainly knew I didn't have time for. Because that's what people pleasing gets you to do. It gets you to say yes. And the ways that this affects men is in a number of different ways. Often they will say, like, oh, I don't mind, do whatever suits you. And what sounds like compliance actually quite often grates on their partners, who get very upset because they feel that they're having to have all of the mental cognitive load. You know, if their husband or their partner is not willing to make a decision about what they want, oh, where should we eat? Should we get a takeaway? What takeaway should we get? And the man has become used to saying, yeah, whatever you want, yeah, do what makes you happy. First of all, that is read by the woman as just passing the cognitive load and all the decision making to her. But she's not going to identify it that that's a man who is people pleasing. And it's not her fault he's people pleasing, but it is the reality that he's people pleasing. These studies suggest that 42% of men are self identifying as people pleasers. It could be that there's a few of those who are just saying it because they think it sounds better. But the reality is, those men who are people pleasing aren't daring to speak. They aren't saying how they think and feel. Their partner is going to think and feel like they have the full mental load. Being able to see this and correct this balance is incredibly important. Being able to just be aware of it, getting that feedback is one of the first conversations that I can have with my male clients, certainly. I'll talk to them about people pleasing. And they go, yeah, but I'm just trying to keep the peace. But the trouble is, we can't keep the peace forever. And what happens is that keeping the peace is storing up a problem for the future. Just like when I was volunteering for things, I was storing up that problem of overload and overwhelm for the future, where I would then get angry and annoyed with my own family for making perfectly reasonable requests on me, or get annoyed with myself when I couldn't do my monumental task list because I hadn't known how to say no. I hadn't known how to express my own needs. I hadn't even known how to actually know what my own needs were. So men are people pleasers. 67% of those men felt it was a natural part of their personality. That in itself is really interesting. You see, being a nice person, being caring and empathic and thoughtful are all qualities that we can have without being a people pleaser. We can be really, really thoughtful about somebody else's needs and still say, look, I prefer to do this. We can be really empathic to what somebody else is going through. No, I'm not going to be able to do that to help you out on this occasion. I can't do that. And that's what we're doing when we're having these conversations about difficult conversations in the clinical space. We're talking about how you balance being a good person, acting according to your own morals and your values, being caring and considerate. I want to be a good dad. Does that mean in the divorce settlement I should give everything to my ex so that she can raise the kids? Or does it mean that we need to have these difficult conversations so we can work out a settlement that works for both people so the children still have access to both their parents? These are kind of really important, difficult conversations to have. Looking after oneself during separation and divorce, looking after your own needs, looking after your own housing needs and living needs and your mental health needs is not selfish. But if you have been a people-pleasing man, and then all of a sudden you're saying, hold on, I'm not happy with this. No, I don't want to continue pretending that we're married when we're not, um, because that's meant to benefit the kids, but I'm not 100% certain that it really is benefiting the kids. These kind of difficult conversations are really complicated to have, and they're really, really important. Because a people pleasing man can fall into the trap of ignoring himself and his own thoughts and needs. And in doing that, not only is he perpetuating the idea that he's not taking responsibility, but he's actually not necessarily supporting his children in the way that they need. So sometimes the thing that we're doing that feels like it's the right thing is actually causing problems. It's a bit like turning a tap the wrong way. The harder we turn it, the more seized up it gets. Because we are doing the right thing by turning, but we're not turning in the right way. So my listen, speak, lead framework is designed to get clarity within this, to be able to look at what's happening when conversations are going wrong, to identify what matters, notice what matters, to notice how facts and interpretation are being dealt with differently, to notice that feelings are being expressed in a shaming, blaming way rather than in a calm, clear way. Recognizing that in a lot of difficult conversations, we're not really looking, we're not actually expressing our need for an outcome. We're not saying what matters. And then when we do speak, we can easily get derailed and get off subject. It's easy to do that, even when we're doing these podcasts. It's easy to go down a blind alley, as it were. People pleasing in men is a real issue. I am so interested for anybody listening to this to reach out to me, to message me, to email me. You can email me at eve@evestanway.co.uk. You can go to my website and book a call. I would like to hear from you at what the impact is of people pleasing, keeping the peace is in your life. Because the danger is it's not what you think it is. First of all, when we people please, we nearly always end up eventually being pushed to a point at which we explode, and that explosion can be really, really damaging. Secondly, when we are people pleasing and when we're just trying to guess what the other person thinks or needs or wants, or we're not expressing our own needs, we end up giving the impression that we don't care or that we're not interested. And that's how I see men and fathers fading into the background. They're so concerned about it escalating. They're so lost within their people pleasing and they're trying to keep the peace that what's happening is the solutions that are happening during separation and divorce are impacting negatively on their ability to be parents. And sometimes what this means is children grow up with a really negative view, very often of their dad, because they saw their dad withdraw. And for the child, here's how they read it. They read the parent withdrawing as a lack of care, that the parent doesn't love them, that the parent doesn't care. It's really hard to say, and that's really hard to experience. But it is also the truth. A parent who is withdrawing is often withdrawing because they think that's the right thing to do. Sometimes there is another side of this as well. There are plenty of men who people please because it just so happens that the other people, their partner, their spouse, their ex, is very volatile, becomes very triggered. Now, there's two aspects of this too. Sometimes the reason why the ex might get very triggered is because the way we are communicating is blaming, shaming, criticizing. It just is. Going through language line by line to look at these differences is a massive part of the work that I do when I'm working one-on-one with clients. Actually looking at the communication. Imagine you had this right now. Imagine you had somebody who really understands this to be able to look at your texts, look at your emails, look at your messages with your partner or your ex, and show you where unintentionally you are either passing the cognitive load to them by not expressing your thoughts and your feelings, or you are actively triggering them using blaming, shaming, or difficult language. Perhaps you're saying the right thing followed by something that's just a bit triggering. And this isn't about being super duper careful about how you speak to somebody else, but it is also about being super duper careful about how you speak to somebody else. And when we get it wrong, correcting that, because we are going to get it wrong. The art of difficult conversations, and it is an art, is learned in childhood. Think back now to your upbringing. How good were your parents at having difficult conversations? I don't mean, oh, there was never any rows when we were growing up, or our parents never talked about anything, or it was all marvelously happy. I'm talking about when there was a difficult topic. How skilled were your parents at managing that and dealing with that and showing you, modeling how that it gets done? For some people, they've had really good parenting and somebody who was very, very clear communicator who could do this in a really good way. But the truth is, the majority didn't. And that's because my parents' generation, their parents were dealing with the First World War, the Second World War, intergenerational change, all sorts of dynamic shift, as well as shifts between how women are and how men are, economic shifts, so many different variations. And what I've noticed is that leaves men much more likely to have defaulted into a people-pleasing aspect. Perhaps they had a really angry dad who was very controlling or was very dictatorial or very authoritarian. And so there's a conscious decision not to be like that. But when we are on one side of the pendulum or when we're on the other side of the pendulum, both states are problematic. What we want to do is be able to recognize both states and come to a point in the middle where we know how to express what we think and feel, and also how to manage it when somebody else might be swinging on that pendulum from side to side, and how to communicate what we think and feel, and how to come up with a solution. Because here's the thing. During separation and divorce, one of the things you hear very often from solicitors and from actually family court judges and mediators is that the solution is likely to not be exactly what either party wants. That's a really significant statement. The solution is not likely to be what either party is entirely looking for. Because during separation and divorce, even during workplace interactions and problems, the chances are the solution isn't going to be exactly what somebody wants necessarily. But our ability to listen and know what the other person wants and elicit what it is that is important to them, our ability to understand and know what we need and feel that we can express it, even if we're not going to get it, that is what makes a difference to the futures of yourself, your ex, and your children. Now, if you are in the middle of a highly acrimonious divorce at the moment, you might think, well, why do I care what my ex ends up with? Why do I care what they feel? And in this, I'm talking to men and women going through separation. Why do I care? The reason why we care is that if we have children, we are talking about our child's other parent, and what negative thing happens to our child's other parent is also happening to our children. That's what an adverse childhood experience is. Damage, upset, or problems with a parent, and that is both parents, the dads and the mums, or the dads and the dads and the mums, depending on what your particular situation is. But both parents matter because the child is the child of both parents. If you don't have kids, it still matters. Because when we learn from a failed relationship what we could have done differently, when we manage it to separation without falling into hatred or conflict or shutting down, we take what we learn forwards into our lives. We take it forwards. We take what we learn through failure into the next stage of our lives. So if you are listening to this and you self-identify as a people pleaser, and perhaps you've been watching the internet and you're talking about attachment and this and that and this and that, if you self-identify as a people pleaser, It's time to learn how to have difficult conversations. It's as simple as that. We can track down where people pleasing comes from, we can talk about it, we can do all this type of stuff, but in the end, people pleasing is a upshot of not knowing how to have a difficult conversation. Difficult conversations are a learnable skill. You can learn how to do it. You might not like a difficult conversation, but you can learn how to do it. You can learn how to express yourself in a clear, calm, straightforward way with somebody who completely disagrees with you. You can understand their position, express your own position, and you can lead. You can lead the conversation to land in a better place. And then what will happen is your past won't become your future. And really, that's my mission, to make sure that my past doesn't become my future and that your past doesn't become your future when it can be changed by reaching out for help. So I'm going to leave you with this message. If this has resonated with you, if you have heard this and you've thought, I can see parts of myself in this, please do like, subscribe, drop me a review. I love it when I get a review. I just had a lovely new Google review. Google Eve Stanway, and you'll be able to go and see it on Google. It means so much because what I know is when I get those reviews, not only do they make me feel good, but I know we read reviews, people read reviews, and even this, if this isn't about your own difficult conversation, if perhaps you've done your work and you're not people pleasing anymore, but somebody else might be. So please do share this episode with them. Go find me on YouTube, share the video if they'd like to see what I look like when I'm talking. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Dare to Speak Difficult Conversations That Change Everything. You can contact me in the show notes, or you can go to my website. You can just Google me and you'll find me. I've been in the press, in the media, I'm all over the place. Honestly, Google my name, I come up loads. And connect with me, DM me, tell me what episode you'd like me to do next. My mission is to help men have difficult conversations, to help them learn how to do it. Why men? Because I believe strongly that actually men are quite disadvantaged in this area, and I'm good at that. My approach works really well with men, but it works with women too. So if you're listening to this and you're a woman and you think, well, I'd like to understand why my husband or spouse or partner or ex finds this so hard, or I'd like to understand, what I can do myself, reach out, DM me, book a call, book a free 20-minute chat, and we'll talk you through it. Take care and have an absolutely great day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.